So budget 5G smartphones are kind of like those god-awful Zoom quizzes. About a year ago they basically didn't exist, and these days, if anything, there are too bloody many of them. The likes of Xiaomi, Realme and Motorola have just released their own 5G phones under £300, and now Oppo is at it with the A74 5G, which will cost you just 249 quid here in Blighty, comes packing a Snapdragon 480 chipset, a 5000 mAh battery, a triple lens camera and some respectable specs to rival other budget 5G blowers. Now, I've been using the Oppo A74 5G as my full-time smartphone for the past week. I have my SIM lodged in there, so here is my in-depth review to tell you all you need to know and how it stacks up against the rest of the budget 5G clan. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do poke subscribe, ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now, although this is your standard plastic handset, I've got to say I do quite like the way that it looks and feels. It's definitely a simple but smart design, and this fluid black model is certainly attractive enough. And thankfully, despite the shiny finish, that hazy design and the darker coloration means that finger smudges aren't actually quite as bad as I originally thought they would be. The main problem with plastic phones is, of course, they tend to scratch up quite easily. Normally after even just a week of use, you got a couple of little nicks here and there. Thankfully, just some teeny little scars down at the very bottom of the Oppo A74 5G so far, and that is it. And you do get a condom case bundled in the box to help protect it if you are a little bit paranoid. Actually, paranoid is not really the correct term at all, because it will scratch up over time, guaranteed, if you don't slap on some sort of protective cover. And the Oppo A74 5G is a 6.5-inch behemoth. I say behemoth, it's pretty much an average size for 2021 to be perfectly honest. So as usual, one-handed use is about as much fun as bobbing for dog shit. But thankfully, Oppo has chucked in a couple of little one-handed tools to help out. So you've got the usual shenanigans like being able to swipe down that notifications bar from anywhere on the screen. And also if you swipe up one of the edges, that then drags all of those app icons down to the bottom edge of the display, so they're much easier to open. And that particular feature is part of ColorOS 11, which is sat all snug in the lap of Android 11, changing up the look and the general vibe of Google's OS. In fact, this actually changes up the UI quite a bit. When you first boot up the Oppo A74 5G, things like the apps tray are completely absent. You don't have the gesture navigation, it's the clunky navigation bar down below, as you'll see if you check out my unboxing video. Thankfully though, you do have the option of adding all this stuff back in if you can actually find it all in the various menus and settings and all the rest of it as well. And I am thankful that the Oppo A74 5G doesn't come absolutely bogged down with all kinds of crapware as well. You do get a couple of bits like Facebook and TikTok on there, which I certainly did not ask for. But apart from that, it's nowhere near as bad as the likes of a Xiaomi smartphone. But anyhow, delete those little buggers off and you've got the bulk of 128 gigs of internal storage to play around with, plus micro SD memory card support in a separate slot from the dual SIM slots. And if you saw that unboxing, you'll already know my thoughts on ColorOS, from that god-awful settings menu, which is still a nightmare to navigate in this 11th iteration, to the thankfully actually quite helpful personalization features. Thankfully, it does at least seem to be a glitch-free experience here on the Oppo A74 5G. I didn't see any apps crashing, any other weird little bugs or freakouts. And no problems either with the excellent fingerprint sensor or that face recognition, although the face recognition does seem to work even when I'm clad in a massive face mask, so not sure exactly how secure that one is. I've got to say, I rather like the 6.49-inch LTPS display as well, which fair enough is nothing special in this budget phone realm, and it's definitely not quite as impressive as OLED screens on the likes of the Redmi Note 10 Pro or the Realme 8 Pro, but I was definitely happy enough slumped on a sofa after a hard day's slog, either watching a bit of telly on it or playing games. Viewing angles could be a bit better, but the brightness levels are fine. It's a full HD plus resolution, 2400 by 1080. That keeps the visuals nice and sharp. You got no HDR support here, sadly, but you can stream HD video in Netflix and other services. And it is a 90Hz display here on the Oppo A74 5G, but desktop skimming isn't quite as smooth as it is on some more stock Android rivals like the Asus Zenfone 8, for instance. And there's also no dynamic option either, so you've got to manually set it to either 60Hz or 90Hz. But to be honest, the battery is so good in this thing, spoiler alert for later, that you can just keep it at 90Hz, no worries. And on the audio front, the Oppo A74 5G certainly isn't revolutionary, nothing to vigorously rub your thighs in excitement about. That mono speaker output ain't amazing, it's alright, it does the job in a pinch, but of course you've got that headphone jack with high-res certification, so great for your lossless audio. And I had absolutely no troubles with the Bluetooth smarts either as well. The range isn't particularly fantastic, so just keep your phone on you, you'll be fine. Now the Oppo A74 5G is powered by the Snapdragon 480 chipset, one of Qualcomm's most affordable 5G ready platforms, launched at the start of the year, and that's backed by 6 gigs of RAM on this little beauty. I had bugger all problems with the performance on the Oppo A74 A74 5G, thankfully apps loaded up nice and nipply. I wasn't hanging around twiddling my thumbs waiting for stuff to happen. Multitasking is absolutely fine. Apps do seem to close down in the background quite regularly, but again, because they load up so quickly, it's not really an issue. And gamers, as long as you just want to play sort of fairly basic titles, absolutely fine. Like Call of Duty Mobile and PUBG play absolutely fine, even on the higher detail settings with a nice smooth frame rate. I did have a couple of little stumbles and judders here and there when I was first originally testing out the A74, but that seemed to sort itself out after just a day or so, and that's just a nice, smooth, consistent frame rate from there on out. Got 180 Hz touch sampling on this thing, so every poke and swipe is instantly registered, and if you want to check out the gaming tools that come packed into ColorOS as well, you go see those in my full unboxing video. And of course, yeah, because it's the Oppo A74 5G, naturally you have 5G smarts built into that Snapdragon 480 platform as well, so good news if you want next-gen connectivity. But where the Oppo A74 5G really impressed me was the battery life. You've got a 5,000 milliamp capacity cell stuffed into this thing, and I gotta tell you, I could not kill this thing dead in a single day, even with lots of Skyping, camera, play, gaming, all that good stuff, media streaming, lots of screen on time. I generally ended the day with around sort of 30% life remaining. So if you're a bit more casual, just, you know, occasionally checking messages and having a bit of browse of the internet, you'll easily last 2 full days on this thing, no worries. And yeah, it is only 18-watt charging here on the Oppo A74 5G. I know that does put some people off the slower charging speeds, but the good news is you've got smart charging built into this thing as well, so you can actually just plug it in all night long. It will trickle charge until the point where you're about to jump out of bed the next day based on whatever time your alarm is set. So basically that means you can plug it in all night, every single night or every other night, because the battery life is that good. You don't need to charge it up every day, and you'll be absolutely fine in the long term, touch wood, fingers crossed, etc. Now, as always, let's finish with a squint at that camera tech, and what you've got here is a quad lens camera arrangement slapped on that shiny arse. Don't get too excited though, because it's not particularly thrilling. It's a pretty standard budget setup, headed up by a 48 megapixel primary shooter. Your indoor shots can definitely look rather soft and grainy, which is a pretty standard complaint with budget smartphones, although I definitely enjoy better results on rivals like the Redmi Note 10 Pro, which is a similar cost. But at least the night mode does help to brighten things up in dim conditions. And there's not too much to moan about when shooting outdoors in good lighting. Those colours are reasonably natural, occasionally a little saturated, but the HDR smarts are respectable as long as you stick with that default 12 megapixel setting. However, the night mode unfortunately doesn't seem to help a huge amount when it is actually nighttime. Overall, not a stellar camera performance by any means. I was a little bit disappointed by what I saw from the Oppo A74 5G. You'll definitely get better results from Xiaomi and Poco rivals around this sort of price point. Although I have to say, if you are looking for a budget 5G smartphone, often the camera does suffer as the manufacturers kind of juggle costs and expenses. The Oppo A74's 8 megapixel ultra-wide angle shooter does little to redeem things, offering quite murky snaps at times and very different color reproduction. And yeah, if the lighting isn't great, just forget it. And as for those final 2 lenses slapped on the back end, well, certainly do not get your hopes up for anything good there, because what you got is a 2 megapixel monochrome lens and a 2 megapixel macro lens. Whoopity-doo. Video tops off at Full HD resolution, not 4K, though my footage still looked alright when beamed to a telly. Audio is not great in windy conditions, but otherwise fine. And image stabilization is kind of, I guess it's almost a thing, although there's definitely some serious bob action when walking and shooting. And last up, that 16 meg selfie shooter is fine for snapping simple memories, but it tends to struggle indoors, and don't expect realistic color capture. Occasionally my snaps also came out a little bit balked, like this here example, which, I mean, it looks like I accidentally went to sleep on a hot iron or something. The portrait mode is alright, low light performance less so. The screen flash feature just makes me look like a f***ing vampire or something. So that right there is my full, final, frank review of the Oppo A74 5G, and it is definitely a shame that that camera's a bit of a letdown, because the rest of the phone I really like, especially that battery life. It is absolutely stellar performance from this thing. And I gotta say, this sort of price point, if you're not particularly hot on the 5G, you're not really too bothered about that next-gen connectivity, then maybe look at something like the Redmi Note 10 Pro instead, which offers a better AMOLED display. You've still got pretty strong battery life from that thing, and you've got better camera tech. In the meantime, check out my roundups of the best budget smartphones in 2021, some hot Oppo action in all there, as well as the likes of Realme, Xiaomi, all that good stuff as well. I will be updating my best budget 5G phones roundup as well, because there have been so many lately. I definitely need to get that up to date. But it'd be great to hear your own personal thoughts down below in the comments. Please do poke, subscribe, and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech, and have yourselves a fine ass rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you.